Excellent, everybody. So it's just gone 10 a.m. I see Simon there, you've turned us on live. So if anyone's logging in, they're welcome to attend our meeting. We'll get underway. The first item is just for apologies. So I've got 12 people on the screen, and I can see in terms of committee members, I can see Councillor Glusina is here. I can see the Mayor, Her Worship, is here. I can see Councillor Wallace. We have, who else needs to be here? We have an apology, I believe, from Councillor Petley. Is that correct?
Correct. And Councillor Napu-Lipscomb.
Councillor Napu-Lipscomb. Okay. So can I have a mover and a seconder, please, that those apologies be sustained?
I move.
I'm second.
Thank you, Councillor, Your Worship, and Councillor Glusina. That's apologies are sustained.
Mr. Chair,
now confirmation of the. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, can I see that Councillor Naylor isn't present. Could I get somebody, or could somebody make contact with him just to make sure that he has realised that it's on? I know he's had all the information, the same as the rest of us, but just to check out.
I can send him a text, Jenny, and see if he answers.
Thank you.
We're all right for a quorum?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hopefully he'll be on the call shortly. So the second item for the day is the confirmation of the agenda. I'm just going to ask for leave for the addition of a late item. It's just been put in the notice gone out that we had an item that we want to add today that was not available until yesterday late. So it's just been added to the agenda this morning. The secretary's added it, and it's relating to a proposal for an audit of COVID-19 response at council from in partnership with KPMG. So the proposal has been circulated, but I just would like a mover and a seconder, if I could please, for the addition of this.
I move it, Sandra Wallace.
I'm happy to second it. Oh, we're frozen.
If, I don't know if everybody can hear me, but Gray, you're frozen.
Yeah.
I'll send one of the team up.
Thanks, Simon.
So I just made contact with Hans. He's put his apologies and he didn't realise we had the call.
All right. It's Gray's chairman here, back online. I've now, the internet at council has actually died, and I'm now just logged in on my iPad. Can anyone hear me or see me still?
Oh yes, I can see you.
Yep,
Perfect.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so I've completely switched technology. Maybe Simon, if you're there, Ash must still be somewhere in the building. He might be able to come up and get me going again, but here he's just coming now. So these are the joys of meeting on Zoom. Ash is here now assisting me getting back online. There was a message about unstable internet, Ash, that so we'll just carry on in time on. So did we receive a movement item of KPMG audit? Billy, if we had a second while I was offline.
I can second that, Gray.
Yep, I had
Chairman.
Sandra and Her Worship.
Excellent. All right, fantastic. So I'll put that item, all those happy that that be added, will say aye.
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 Those against, no. That's carried. Meanwhile, we've also had just a message come through that there is an apology from Councillor Naylor, so we need to record that. Billy, if I could just have a point of process, are we still in fact in possession of a quorum if we have Councillor Napol-Lipscomb, Councillor Naylor and Councillor Petley absent? Can I just check that? Your Worship or someone, are you available to confirm that?
A quorum is a majority of members. Where there is more than one independent member on the committee, a quorum will include at least one independent member. So we do have a majority and a quorum.
Right. Excellent. So I'm now back on council technology, and we're just getting my iPad shut down.
Put your video on so we can see your dial.
Where's the video? Click that. Aha. All right. Are there any conflicts of interest today for the meeting?
Nope.
There are none, thank you. I'm now going to ask for confirmation of the minutes from our last meeting, which were held under different circumstances and what seems like a completely different era, frankly, but the minutes have been circulated. Are there any matters of accuracy that anyone wishes to raise? That being the case, I'll ask that somebody move that they be accepted as a true and correct record, please.
Wallace.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Your Worship. All those in favour that the minutes be recorded as accurate will say aye.
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 Those against, no. That's carried. Excellent. So our next item is we'll start
Sorry,
into the...
sorry,
yes.
Mr. Chair. Can I just ask a question of matters arising?
Yes.
There was a talk about the community perception results, and Councillor Naylor suggested that staff look at a new style of survey because of the, he was concerned about the participation in that survey. Has anything been followed up on that, please, from staff?
Is Gordon still there?
Yep.
No.
Yeah. So I'm here. So
What
so
I know of it is that.
go for it. Go for it, Ben. Okay.
Oh, you know, it's going to introduce it really, just and say that when they do the samples and blocks, they don't keep on just doing the first 100 people that come through on the telephone survey. They make sure that they are in demographic and blocks, so they make sure they do have a representative sample, so it's not all, for example, over 65s. And they were looking at other technologies and other thoughts, but really early, they still believe that this is still the best mechanism, because a lot of the other ones are fraught with problems. I don't know whether Mr. Naidu has anything to add.
I think Councillor Naylor's issue was also phoning, because a lot of people don't have phones, and yes, you're right, looking at other technology. I wondered just had that been discussed any further.
To you, Chair, yes, Your Worship, we have been working with the survey company. The actual contract comes for completion at the end of June. So we are working with them to say one of the things missing from that report or the report is actually the procedure and the process and so what we're hoping to do is the next time we report we'll say to you in the report is this is what basically the procedure, this is what the groups that they identified, what types of technology you're using to make contact with those people here. So we'll have that information the next time we report on that the results.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knighty, for your answer. You're happy with that, Your Worship?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any further matters arising from the minutes? There being none, we'll move on to the first of our reports for the day. And just getting, yes, thank you. The screen's now turned up. So the first report of the day is from Mr. McFadgen, and it is the quality and risk report. So Mr. McFadgen, if you're online, please, would you speak to your report? Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'd like to take the report as read. Over the last 8 weeks, I guess the quality and risk department, a lot of our focus has been on response to the COVID-19. So I will go through and highlight some of the key parts in it. In health and safety and our trends and stats, of course, with everyone in lockdown, we've seen a major decrease in number of incidents and such happening. But it has allowed for a large period of a good period for work to be done in health and safety processes and such for when we return, so there's more information available to staff. The incidents that had occurred during the lockdown period mainly related to our essential workers that were out and about. One was a personal safety incident for one of our animal control workers who had an aggressive member of public approach them during lockdown, but it was handled and dealt with in a manner that didn't cause any dramas. Focus over the last few weeks with changes from level 4 to level 3. We spend a period of time working with our contractors, making sure they all had COVID-19 plans in place to enable all the construction work to recommence. And that was all carried out in well laid out manner. Under risk management, the biggest focus in the period has been around the business continuity planning, and the last few weeks has been developing of plans in regards to level 3 to level 2 reduction to enable council facilities to get up in operation once level 2 comes into effect. So that's where our focus has been in the last couple of weeks. Along with, we have been supporting the EOC with a number of, up to 4 staff at some points of time, and we also assisted them with doing some of the risk management process down in for civil defence.
Excellent.
Yeah, and there is a breakdown of the KPIs at the end of the table, but the full breakdown of KPIs is probably not going to be able to be realised till the end of this month once we're back and we know what the impact has come about from our response to COVID-19.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Your Worship. Thank you for that. I think it's really important that, and I think, and elected members would like to know, I'm sure, when our facilities, now that we're going to level 2 on Thursday, when they will be open, when staff will have everything in place for our facilities to open, including the pool, including the libraries, the event centre, and how we're going to manage those. Again, the transfer station in Putaruru. Those are the questions that I've been getting, particularly now that we're in level 2. I've had some texts already about when the library's going to open, and how we're going to manage the contact tracing that we're all going to have to do, and the hygiene stations, etc., that we're going to have to do. And I think, where are we in that planning? Because we should be working through that all the time. Yes.
So the plan was discussed with ET and endorsed or done on Friday. So we've set up contact tracing for all our facilities. That will be either the use of a contactless app that's available that people can use mobile phones, and for those that don't have mobile phones, it will be using an old paper-based register. But every facility will have the ability to contact trace everybody that's coming into those facilities on their day of opening. Hygiene stations, the facilities manager is now busily going around and setting up all the hygiene stations. We still have a bit of a challenge in regards to sourcing all the equipment. So some of the stations mightn't be completely finished, but there will be hygiene stations at all facilities in some shape or form for reopening. Into the reopening of the facilities, we've outlined the requirements of what that means for each facility based on the COVID, the level 2 requirements. So we've identified number of people that can be in the facilities, how they're going to, the mobile app and that, how they're going to be able to track how many people they've got on site, and it'll give them a live notice. There will also be, there's special processes put in place for receiving books coming back to the library. There's processes being put in place for how our customer service areas are going to operate, such as protection for staff and for members of public. In regards to opening, that's probably been more an operational, is now coming down to operational when they can get, like with staffing, because there is still some challenges with staff this week due to some of them have children that we won't have a full complement of people back because schools don't start back till next week. So some staff might still be having to spend the extra couple of days at the end of this week looking after children and or taking care of other matters. So operationally, I guess the communications will come out based on at what point what facilities will open what, but I would assume operationally that everything would be pretty much close to be up and running if by at least Monday next week.
Details around that are just getting absolutely finalised today,
Yep.
particularly around the return of work, return to work people. That will go out to elected members either tonight or tomorrow morning, and then there'll be the press release later in tomorrow, Wednesday, to actually let people know. But Andrew's right, most things, as we would expect, most things will be open. The Pataru transfer station it won't be open on Thursday. We've still got traffic management sign off to have with NZTA being on the main road. That's a major challenge with queuing traffic on that main road would be extraordinarily difficult, problematic if we didn't have traffic management in there.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, through you, Mr. Chair. The other one is about migrating staff back to the office so that the office is open for people then to come in and pay and getting reasonably back to normal. I mean, that is a safety issue and a health issue for our staff, I know, but also for our community. So have we got a date that the office will actually be open 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 4:30 again?
Yes, it'll be back on Thursday.
Thursday? Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you, Worship, for the questions, and to Mr. McFadyen and Mr. Smith for the answers. So I'll open up the meeting for further questions of Mr. McFadyen for the quality and risk report. Are there any other questions from committee members, please?
No.
Just if I can,
Yes.
and it's directed to Mr. Smith and Mr. McFadyen. Health and safety and mental health of staff. How are we going with support of staff, and how are they coping?
Look, over the last 6 weeks, there's
Generally.
been generally it's been a trying time for a number of our staff. Managers have been doing daily or at least regular checkups with staff in support with between either HR or myself, we've been doing a few one-on-ones with certain members that might have been struggling to cope a little bit harder. It has been difficult times and challenging times for some of them, but in general, we have coped very well, and we've, especially through our human resource team, they've provided some really good support in the background for staff.
Thank you.
Just to add, to Mr. Chair, in terms of the EOC staff that have been going down to Taupo, so we ensured that they had at least 4 days on, 4 days off, so they could recover. It was long days, so we ensured that they had some time to recover before the next shift.
Good. Just taking it back to the report too on page 15. Oh, thank you for that, Mr. Naidu, Mr. McFadden. Back to page 15 and the table there about the type of event and event severity. Sitting in there on the 20th of February, there was a catastrophic event severity event, a catastrophic event. What is an example of a catastrophic event? Where does that, to me, that's bad. And what was it, please? And what did we do to fix it and for it not to happen again? I mean, that's concerned me when I saw that, because it stood out.
So the event severity, it can also be potential. So it wasn't actually a catastrophic, but it had the potential to be catastrophic. So event severity also looks at, so a near miss where it could have had the potential for going on to being a significant event. This was an event that related to an aggressive member of public that actually,
Okay.
so there was a few things, and what actually happened, police had to be involved, so it didn't escalate to where somebody got injured, but it had the potential to be a severe things that had progressed.
And we had systems and processes in place to manage that. Awesome.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just if we can just go down a little bit further back to page 18, Billy, I was interested in just in the KPI table there, just about the wastewater abatement notice and the issues going on there. Can someone, Mr. McFadden, enlighten me on that? Because of the list there of not achieving that one looked to me to be in the more serious list than some of the others. Can someone speak to that, please?
So that was, oh, sorry. So the abatement notice that has been responded to, and a program has been put in place in conjunction and agreement with Waikato Regional Council by the assets team with the water services to address the concerns that had been raised through that. And it's, as far as I'm aware, we have made some really good progress in ensuring compliance to our responses to our requirements now.
Okay, thank you. So often with an abatement notice, there is it's either actioned and there is further enforcement or litigation, or it's withdrawn, or is it still on the table and we're just waiting for the progress around the discussion of ameliorating the concerns, or is it likely to be withdrawn or actioned at some point?
I would have to follow up with the team actually where the current status is with that abatement notice at the moment.
Is through you, Mr. Chair, is Mr. Anderson on the call?
Not that I can see.
Perhaps we need to have all the managers here when we have audit and risk so that we can have these answered. Sorry, thank you.
So I will follow up. As far as I was aware, our action plan had been accepted though by Waikato Regional Council that we were taking to address the abatement notice.
Yep. Right. Thank you. Are there further questions on the quality and risk report from any other committee members, please, or comments from management?
Can I, sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, please, Your Worship, yes.
Thank you. Business improvement and quality on page 17, and we talk about ProMap. Now I hear about ProMap a lot, but I don't know a lot about it. In fact, I know very little about it, but there is a lot of work going on. And obviously there's been a lot of work going on through lockdown. Can I have an explanation on what ProMap is, please?
So ProMap is a software tool that helps captures our processes. So it's a tool that's used for recording and documenting procedures and processes to, I guess, well, I don't guess, it actually helps us protect the knowledge and information transfer between staff and ensure that our activities are being carried out in a standardized manner. It was put in place to try and reduce the amount of information or knowledge lost when people move on or leave council, and helps with the succession planning. So it provides, if you look at the software, and I'll attach a copy of a procedure in the next report I do so everyone can actually see what one looks like. You get a flow chart for a procedure, and then there's a step-by-step instruction on how an activity is carried out. So for example, we've got ProMap processes that relate around how to raise purchase orders, how to carry out procurement activities, how to raise an incident in the health and safety system. So basically any member of staff can go into ProMap, and then if they need to carry out something, they can start to find the process on how to do that and actually follow step by step through to get the end result achieved.
It's a very important tool. Excellent. Thank you for that.
All right. Thank you. If there are any further questions from members, comments? There being none, the recommendation we have back on page 12 is that the report be received, the Quality and Risk Group report. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that motion?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor
Chairman.
Christina. Have a seconder, please.
Second it, Wallace.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. All those in favour that the report be received will say aye.
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 Those against, no. That's carried. So we're getting close to 10:30. Hopefully we'll log in from KPMG shortly, but in the meantime we'll move to the Information Services report. So Mr. Lewis is present, and thank you, Mr. Lewis, for your report and getting me wired up for technology for our meeting today. That was also very helpful. We seem to be having no problems now. Everything's going well. So I'll ask you to speak to your report, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. I wonder if you wouldn't mind, I'll take the report as read, and with your permission, I'd like to briefly respond to concerns raised at the last meeting about IT costs, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say, whilst it's certainly true that information services costs have risen, they haven't kept pace with inflation. Spend in real terms has fallen by 19% over the last 5 years. That's more than $300,000. In that time, IS staff have been cut from 10 to 6. And I'd ask you to bear in mind that some IS positions are part-time. So the actual resourcing of IS is 5 full-time equivalents. That's around 3% of all council staff. Those 5 FTEs are expected to cover IT, systems, security, development, major projects and records. As a comparison, Auckland Council have 15% of their total headcount in IT. That's some 600 staff. The concerns might have been prompted by the $70,000 I requested in the annual plan. And what elected members may not be aware of is the response to your call for cost reductions to eliminate rates increases. As a result, there's now a corresponding cut in the IS budget for next year of $69,500. It may be that there's simply a poor perception of IS or limited knowledge of its budget history, and perhaps expenditure on IT is seen as a necessary evil that generates limited value to council or ratepayers. If that's the case, then I as manager must accept responsibility for failing to demonstrate that value. So I do have a suggestion. Once this crisis is over, please allow me to present some suggested outcomes, perhaps as part of the long-term plan discussions. These would be options, ways in which technology can make a positive impact on council and the community. It wouldn't be a technical presentation, but more of a demonstration of possibilities, showing what is possible with technology, yeah? But also seeking your direction and support. At the same time, I would invite you to challenge me not only to deliver those things, but also to demonstrate value on an ongoing basis. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions on my statement or the report before you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Appreciate your comments. So I'll open up the meeting for queries or comments from members of the committee, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would, I've got a comment to make. With regard, just going back to the cutting of costs, I see technology as something which will save the council a huge amount of money if applied properly. And to cut at one end when you can have huge benefits at the other is not really the right thing to do. One of the things that technology is providing us right here is the opportunity to have a Zoom meeting. And lots of these meetings which actually take place by councillors and council staff could easily be transferred permanently onto Zoom, saving a lot of office time, travelling time, and just generally saving the council a huge amount of money. So I think all strength to the technology department and let them get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Glusina. That's good positive comments. Perhaps, yeah, while we're dealing with the topic of what Mr. Lewis said about costs, other members, perhaps we all just around the table have a response or thoughts about the benefits of technology to council.
If I can, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. And thank you for that, Mr. Lewis. Heartfelt, absolutely. We have still got a position for IS in the budget, haven't we? We didn't take that position out, we've maintained it.
Yeah, I'm waiting for approval of the annual plan, but yes, there is a position expected to be
That's
approved.
right. And I at one stage we were trying to bring it forward that we could start the advertising, but it probably wasn't, the process probably wasn't as good for us doing that. I certainly agree that there is a perception. I think that IS is just, it keeps on and on and on going up and up and up. And I think it has been proved while we've been in lockdown, the benefits certainly of technology. I also know that as our roles in as elected members and trying to get the biggest bang for our bucks for our ratepayers, your department probably is one that appears to be easy. Although to be honest, I think you have pretty well maintained your budgets up until particularly this last year, and also, and partly also because we're going out with a 0% average rate revenue increase, we've pretty well cut the OPEX back. So we've had to find other ways to get to that 0%. So I think it's particularly times that are unusual, unprecedented. I hear what you're saying about IT, and I think probably a presentation would be very helpful for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll leave it at that at this stage.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Your
I think
Worship.
it's through you, Mr. Chair, if it's possible.
Yes.
It's hugely important that we look at the evolution of information services. We've come from a point where we just needed to get our internal workings in order, and Simon has done a great job to get us to that point. Now, over the next coming years, we can start looking at what we can do in terms of innovation and adding real value to the organisation. One of the key things, and hence the replacement of a role that we had dropped a number of years ago around information management, is that we actually, that's an area where I think from a risk perspective that we are wanting and that we really do need to have much more time investment in it, especially when we move to a new document management system, which will bring a whole lot of change management internally around how we store and retrieve documents and use information appropriately, and make sure that we're safe from a not only from a privacy point of view, but just from a document management. We live in an environment where legislation dictates what is required to be stored, and people are prepared to challenge us on if we don't do that appropriately. Yeah, I think it's exciting times. Simon's certainly the right person to have because of his innovation and his willingness to push things forward. So I think we're in a great space at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
If I can add to that, Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Lewis, I think it would be very timely for you to do a presentation, to give a presentation to all elected members on what it could be like. I mean, rather than us just having the bottom of the line of everything, what we could achieve with top of the line and savings for it. So I guess we have to find out from elected members where they see it going first, and then work towards that. So a presentation would be very valuable sooner rather than later, now that we're going to go into long-term planning meetings and workshops.
Just from my perspective, I think a lot of the important thing is it's actually really difficult for everybody to know what you don't know. So Simon, from your perspective, is to actually outline some of the areas of opportunity so that we can open our eyes. Simon's done that for us in terms of ET, and the opportunities that are there for us are quite staggering. And it is actually really difficult to know that when you're not an IT or IM specialist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So some good positive comments there, and opportunity for a presentation for elected members on the benefits of IS. And just Councillor Glusina, in response to your comments, as you're aware, a number of other companies I'm involved with, there is a lot of debate about how the extent to which board meetings should be online versus physically present, and there's a range of a third present and 2/3 online, and there's one company's being proposed through to another extreme of going back to just about full face-to-face. So I'm sure we'll land somewhere in the middle, but the opportunity to, as you rightly say, save cost and get efficiency is certainly there with technology. So thanks for comments.
Thank you.
So is there any further questions of Mr. Lewis on the IS report?
Only, Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment, please?
Yes, Mr. Naidu.
So I think you're absolutely right. The timing is perfect now as we move into a long-term plan to start looking at these opportunities. But I just want to acknowledge both Mr. Lewis and Mr. McFadden through this COVID-19, and there's a huge amount of work through them and their teams around technology and health and safety and procedures. So I just want to make that, just acknowledge that work they've done.
Thank you, Mr. Naidu, and all of you in the senior team have good visibility of all the things going on, so appreciate your positive comments. If there's no further questions, we have a recommendation on page, where are we here? Thank you, Billy. Page 19, that the report, Information Services report be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please?
I'll move that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Glusina, and Your Worship, the Mayor. All those in favour that the report be received will say aye.
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 Those against, no. It's carried.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just out of that, but I just wanted to lastly make comment on the survey, the internal survey that was held, where the 84% satisfaction and a value score of 83%. Looking at under how it was marked, or the trends. Oh no, the trends were unavailable, but the perception and the results are excellent. And congratulations, Mr. Lewis. I just wanted to add that, sorry.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. That's on page 22 if people want to refer to that. So we've had Mr. David Sutton from KPMG has joined us on the call. This is the item that we've approved for discussion for today, the potential audit of COVID-19 response by council. I'll get you, Mr. Sutton, you're there. I'm just checking if you have your, yes, you're now on video and online. So what I'm going to ask, if you wouldn't mind, so that it's been quite a bit of work behind the scenes getting this proposal together and making terms of reference. So the business of the day is for committee members to consider the potential audit being proposed. Most have only just had it for less than 24 hours. It's just gone out this morning as a final proposal. It can be amended subject to discussions that we might have. Management have provided some good feedback into the proposal, as have other members of council. So what I'm going to ask Mr. Sutton, if you wouldn't mind just introducing the document, talking, assuming just perhaps not a huge amount of knowledge of how this all might work, but I know you've had a number of other council clients KPMG has worked with in doing these kinds of audits and thinking about COVID-19 in particular. So perhaps if you could just introduce the document, talk about the content of it and give us a little bit of a familiarity with it, and then I'll open up the meeting for questions or discussions about the item. So if you're there, David, that'd be appreciated. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me this morning. So it's undoubtedly true that COVID-19 has had a massive impact on a number of different organisations. And I think from a governance point of view, you know, a lot of organisations have worked through this crisis, have put a lot of resource to working through that. You know, the working from home has arguably been one of the biggest changes to the work environment that we've seen for a very long time. So the whole question is around, you know, how are we ensuring that the response to the crisis has been sound, and, you know, have there been any lessons learned? I think following a crisis, it's always good practice to reflect and think about where things may have gone better. And also, you would have seen guidance from the Auditor General just as we were heading into lockdown around, you know, it's very important for government and local government to maintain good risk management and good ensuring that critical controls still operate across the period. And certainly, you know, when you think of people working from home, how have they been able to still do some of these critical controls, like just reviewing information to support the payment of payroll? You know, how have procurement activities continued to operate to make sure there's due process and that controls haven't been overridden? And so this is the purpose of this review, is to provide some independent assurance to the committee and to the council that these aspects have been in place, but also just you know, a good exercise to work through with management and think about you know, where have we learned some lessons, where could things have gone better. So the scope is two main themes. The first is around that business continuity planning, that's BCP, and crisis management post reflections. So looking through, you know, do people understand their roles and responsibilities? How did we set off the crisis? How did that work? Was there adequate visibility to governance? How do we track issues? What was the impact on BAU? So, you know, where we had to reallocate resource to support crisis response, how did that impact projects and normal operations of particularly critical services? So that's one aspect of the scope. The second scope is, as I mentioned, around critical controls. So looking through some of those core areas, IT, payments, payroll, health and safety, did we see any deterioration in some of those critical controls that were operating? Where we did, was that flagged at a governance level? Was there a way that we should have escalated that through? If we couldn't comply with a procurement policy, how have we handled that? So the way the review would operate is it's very much via discussion. So we would look to identify key personnel across the council, including councillors, to have discussions on what are their perceptions. So it's not a detailed internal audit review. It is more having some good discussions, getting people to reflect, asking some questions and just seeing what comes out of those discussions, and then flagging some of those learnings, some of that feedback through in a report, both to the executive team for consideration and also to this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton, for introducing the document. I'll assume, obviously being aware that there's not been a lot of time to fully read this given its late release, but there is the opportunity now both for committee members. Perhaps first we'll ask for any feedback you have, but I'd also shortly open up for management. Thank you for those of you who had input into suggestions for inclusion in here. And we'll have a bit of a discussion and see where we end up. So first of all, to committee members, are there any comments or questions addressed to Mr. Sutton or suggestions as to how this might move forward? Committee members, thanks.
I've got a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gusina. Yep.
With respect to working at home, and I was just thinking through how ACC issues going to be sorted out. If you have an accident at home when you're working at home, will the employer accept the full responsibility in terms of payment of wages? And what way is there of monitoring health and safety in a home if the employer is going to be liable for some cost as a result of an accident? Just an example, someone might wander down the hall and trip over something there and break their leg or their collarbone, and it's a lengthy time off work. So just whether that's been considered as an issue and where it's likely to go.
I'll answer from a health and safety perspective. It is actually one thing that we have to consider when we start looking at things with working from home, and that due to the nature of the circumstance, we probably didn't have enough processes in place, but long term we actually do have to put in further checks and that around office setups and that for people at home and ergonomics.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I can
Thank you.
make a comment on that. I attended a webinar series that Mr. Bowden had put together, and that was one of the topics about working from home, and it was designed for local businesses, but it would be appropriate for South Waikato District Council as well. He had an expert in that area, so it'd be worth getting the information from Mr. Bowden, or it is around anyway. But yeah, interesting comment. Thank you.
So interesting. So Councillor Glusina, were you just returning to the audit document? Were you suggesting, would you like to see aspects of working at home and the impacts on health and safety? Do you feel that's potential for part of the audit scope, or is it just a general comment?
I think it is potential for the audit scope, since it's a fairly wide-ranging survey that could easily be included.
Yes, and if I could just comment on that, I think that would absolutely be part of, what the discussions around health and safety. So we, in that stream 2, we did include health and safety as a general stream, and I think that would definitely be part of the discussion to understand, how has the working from home environment both impacted our hazards and risks, and has that been considered and thought through, but also from a governance point of view across health and safety. Are we still comfortable that some of the core governance forums at a management level have operated, things like incident reporting and some of the core controls around health and safety, have they still operated despite people working from home, and how, has there been any impact on some of the strength of those processes?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Your Worship.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Sutton, for this document. I think it's a broad-ranging document, and I think it's pretty well spot on in what we were thinking, or what we were talking about and thinking for this audit. It's not only about trying to trip people up or see what we've done wrong, but it's also about seeing our strengths and what we have done well. And I know that there's been a lot of that happening, where staff have really stepped up and taken on extra responsibilities and done so cheerfully. I certainly will take a step and think, shivers, what could I have done better in the governance role? And I know there's a lot that I could have done better, and it will be a learning for me as well. So I thank you for that. I have just got one comment that I do want to make at this stage about the numbers of people in here that you are planning to interview. A maximum of, sorry, I've got it up on my screen, 15 key stakeholders. is that adequate to get a broad cross-section of comments when you're looking at governance, management, and the incident management team and staff that are working from home? Just a comment, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think that's a very good question. Look, we'd be happy to work through that with both yourself and the management team to work out what the right number is. Obviously, we generally put some guidance around the extent of the interviews. Obviously, they take time and it impacts our budget, but very happy to flex that and push that up if need be. It's just trying to keep it somewhat contained, but obviously take the point, we need to make sure that we do have a good cross section of interviewees involved.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for that. That's a discussion we can have later.
Yeah, it's certainly an issue that staff had raised, and 15 won't be enough. That won't cover the people you need to interview.
There's possible, if I might just add, it's possible that we could also do small workshops with certain groups, which would save a one-on-one interview, which would save a little bit of time. So we could also work through that just as to whether there's appropriate groupings of people that we could pull together. 3 or 4 people would still be quite workable.
Yeah, no, that could work very well. Yep. No,
Well done.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. That would certainly bring some efficiencies and potentially, a significant increase in numbers of people. Just going to ask Councillor Wallace, if you're there as the other elected member, present or committee member, do you have any requests or comments about the proposal?
No, I had just a quick look through it this morning, so it's all pretty quick. But I just, nothing else to add than what hasn't been said. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll just welcome comments from management. There's a number of you on the call. Thank you for those of you who contributed to the suggestions, but very much open to feedback or suggestions from you. You've been in the thick of it while all this has been going on. I'm happy to receive feedback for potential inclusion or changes to the document.
I think it's an important time. We talked about a scheduling for the middle of June, so it gives people a chance to land back after. There's still a number of people in the EOC at the moment that we would need to have back, and there's a number of people that have literally come back in the last week. So having a month with people back and predominantly back in the office will just give a little bit of headspace. We actually don't want to leave it too late so that people forget about what's happened and we've moved on to the recovery phase. This is a good time to do that change. I haven't been able to check our changed our suggestions versus the final document because I've only just received the final document. Was there any thing that you particularly, we can take that offline if there's something that you particularly thought our comments were not what you have reflected in the final document?
I don't believe so, Mr. Smith, but I'll double confirm that, and we can all, as you say, we could always follow that up after the session.
Yeah, certainly follow it afterwards. That'd be great.
All right. Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Time frame and looking at mid-June, a little bit. I am concerned about that because when we look at how quickly we're moving into level 2, and from what's happened, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, and how we're moving through the stages, and how changes are happening so quickly, I am concerned if we leave it till mid-June, then we're going to lose a lot of valuable memories, I guess, or of what's occurred. I would like to see it come through, especially come earlier, and I would be suggesting late May, early June, so it's not that much quicker. And I'm suggesting that the pressure on staff, Mr. Smith, that you talked about, with the EOC now being a Western side and a lot less people being required, and I had heard the possibility of it only lasting a couple of weeks, that EOC into level 2, I think that I would prefer to see it earlier and those staff will be back integrated into their roles. When I see how it's structured and it's just interviews, it's not digging deep and delving into information, I don't think that there is that much pressure than another type of audit. So I would like to see that brought forward.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just hand over to Mr. Sutton just to what. So timing is obviously something we need to agree. In terms of your schedule and availability of staff and resource from KPMG, what would be the potential, earliest possible, as Her Worship has suggested, or timings that you would recommend that, or where you might be available, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think late May, early June is very workable from our point of view. We can fit in with how South Waikato would like to move forward. So timing, we certainly can allocate staff in line with your requirements.
Thank you. Just perhaps feedback from other members of management. I think Mr. Naidu, you've been involved down in Taupo and probably a little bit closer to the issues and changes, and when you're back in Tokoroa thing, have you got any thoughts and comments on timing?
Oh no, absolutely. To you, Mr. Chair. I think I support this audit. I think it's a really good opportunity for us to learn. It's the first time we've been put in this position. We've done training, and I've been involved in the last 10 years, but never ever practice what we learn. So it's a really good opportunity for us to prepare ourselves for the next event if it does happen. We basically did start a learning. Capturing our learnings down at the EOC. So we created a sheet where we said, so at the early stages, we went in and someone mentioned this, we were flying a plane as we were building it. So, everyone was new to this year. It's the first time we've been in this position. So there's a whole lot of things as we went through the journey, we started looking at and saying, oh, we could have did this differently. So we started capturing that information. So I think absolutely right. If we, do this as soon as we can, we got things that we still recall from what's happened there, what we could do differently. As Your Worship said, that a number of the people are back at our offices. I think we only got 4 or 5 staff that are down at the EOC. So there's no issues with the timing around early June. So I'm happy to support that.
Thank you, Mr. Naidu. Is there any other comments from management you'd like to make or have input into the document?
I think we seriously need to look at the timing around having that too early. We've just got people coming back. We've got an immense amount of work on the cards, transitioning people back into the organisation and actually just getting the starts of the recovery and looking at our projects moving forward. So yeah, we can talk later about the timing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. So again, just final comments that there's KPMG have kindly tabled their resources and things that will be required and costs. That's all there and upfront. So we expect that to go smoothly. Are there any further suggestions or comments from anybody? We'll probably put a motion that we'd like to have the terms of reference endorsed and move ahead with the audit, subject, as Mr. Smith just said, to agreeing a final timing, but we do have availability, as KPMG have said, from late May onwards. So, but just a final opportunity for anyone to make any comments, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a comment.
Yes, Fiona. Yes.
Just for the committee's information, our auditors, who are Deloitte, they're having our interim audit and they're starting that on the 8th of June. When I read the document, I totally agreed with the first part of it, but I do wonder if the second part would be a repeat of the work that Deloitte will be doing, as they normally do it with our interim audit. They'll be checking our processes around our payments, not so much the procurement that is covered, but they certainly will be reviewing that. And I've already had a discussion with Deloitte manager about how that's going to go. So that was just one comment. I just wondered if it was going to be a repeat of the work that they will be doing anyway. And my other question I was wondering if we were going to be doing all these interviews in the office or whether they would be held by Zoom meetings.
Thank you, Mrs. Farrar. That's helpful input. And I'll perhaps put that back to Mr. Sutton. One is in terms of the proposal around auditing of payments and those sort of things, the internal audit focus that you'd bring versus an external, which is our standard local government audit from Deloitte. That was a question. Perhaps you could respond to that. And the other question, yep.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I think we don't want to duplicate what Deloitte are doing. My only comment on that would be because the review is discussion-based and interview-based, we're looking for people to reflect on their own controls. So we're not re-auditing those controls. We're really looking for people to reflect on, yes, actually that didn't work quite so well. So a slightly different focus to Deloitte, and also very much around an operational approach rather than just financial. So I think the discussions, because they're not an internal audit and on a detailed basis, I still think could be quite valuable to still include within the scope. I think in terms of the basis of the interviews, that just depends on where we are at the end of May, June, or when the review starts. We're happy to do the interviews by either channel. So either face-to-face or by Zoom or other digital approach.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. So, and one might suspect that a combination of both could work if we have a few small groups. Maybe Gabby could come down and work with that, and then access to senior managers in terms of those original 15 could be on Skype or Zoom or whatever. So we'll work that through. But thank you, Mrs. Farrar. Those are good suggestions and points. Anyone else on management got anything they'd like to add?
Not from me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McFadgen. All right. So, well, look, what I'd like to do is we had a good discussion. I'd like to have the terms of reference formally adopted and agreement from the committee that we move ahead with this audit, subject to final agreement about timings. I'm just looking at the screen. Billy, could you perhaps, as Minute Secretary, just tell us what the best way of handling this is? Did we formulate a final motion for acceptance of this, or do we need to formulate one now for committee members to move and second?
There's one in the paper.
On your screen.
Ah, there it is on my screen. So it is, we're all done. Here we are, recommendation 1, that the report document be received and that the committee endorse the TOR as presented by KPMG. Excellent. So there we are, came on at last minute. So do I have a mover and a seconder for those recommendations?
I'll move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Glusina and your worship. Any further or final discussion? There being none, I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour will say aye.
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 Those against, no. That's carried. Thank you. That's excellent. So thank you, Mr. Sutton, for your input. That's appreciated, and we'll be in touch in due course with yourself or with Gabby Wyborn and Hamilton as to final timings, and appreciate your assistance to our council. Cheers.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, committee members and staff. So there's a final item here. The performance report, item 5.3, is now on the screen. So this report has been already to Corporate and Regulatory Committee, but it is a statutory part or standard part of our overview here from Audit. So there's a chance to add any further questions for anyone who was at the other meeting the other day and have any further debates about the performance report. I'll just perhaps kick off, Mrs. Farrar, by just asking how things are getting on with the timing for the next. I think we had this report is to the end of February. Obviously, March and April are the next months, just around timings for the next round of financial reports. If you could help us understand those, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. we hadn't done a full report to different months, but we have had a look specifically at the revenue and the capital expenditure. So I can give some further information on that. In terms of the next meeting, the next corporate meeting that we would normally be reporting to, which is in about 6 weeks' time, we would certainly expect to have more update to report to that meeting. But what I have done, and it was very helpful with the announcement yesterday of us going to level 2, because it enabled me to do a little bit of projection of our revenue. And at this stage, and it's quite a conservative estimate, I think our shortfall will be around about $500,000 in our revenue. That excludes our revenue projections from our private bank investments, as we had the presentation last week from BNZ. So that income is down, but it is ring fenced, and that's credited back to our asset replacement reserve, so it doesn't have any impact on rates. And the other thing I've excluded is NZTA revenue, and the reason for that is because that is linked directly to CapEx. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but basically that $500,000 is that we've missed out on a couple of months of revenue. There are some areas that we still will get revenue during that time. We've got various rentals that are in place. But yeah, my projection is expecting that we'll have another month of revenue coming in June.
Yeah. So that projection of $500,000 is for the full financial year, or just for the months where we've been under lockdown?
That's a projection to the end of the year about where our revenue will fall. But it does include the loss of revenue basically for March and April.
Yep.
And part of May.
Thank you. So I'll just open up the meeting then for questions around financial situation, either from the report as tabled here or from other comments that have been made. Any questions from committee members?
Question, please, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So, thank you. I just need to get my head around our recovery as well, and what's going to be happening there, because we are getting already applications for rent relief, leases being postponed from community organisations on our the use of our sports grounds and our gymnasiums and that type, and the pools, etc. So just going forward, it could be an awful lot more depending on what we do with our recovery plan. I know we're only looking till the 30th of June at the moment, but there could be a way greater impost on our revenue going forward, depending on the decisions that we make in our recovery planning. I must admit, when I saw that this was only to the end of February, that it's out of date before we even got it. Is this, just remind me please, is this what we normally get, a couple of months behind? Or is this an impact because of COVID?
That's primarily an impact due to COVID.
Okay.
Normally we would close our financials off, and best case we could have a report available on about the 12th day of the month. But then of course we have just over a week for the agendas to close before a meeting. So if a meeting is at the very end of a month, then we are possibly able to do the month before, but there will always be a time lag, and the best time lag is probably around 4 weeks later.
Yes, yeah.
5 weeks by the time the committee gets it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Gusina.
the council really needs to have a policy regarding the relief of rental for council-owned property, which was unusable during or was probably still is unusable during the lockdowns. And the policy, we have to consider it can vary from 100% to some other figure. I know that I've got roles in other matters, and in general, it seems to be a 50% concession for substantial commercial outfits that are going to recover, and 100% for those that are in real difficulty. So there's a policy needs to be developed and a discretion given to the chief executive.
Thank you, Councillor Glusina. Maybe we'll
I
ask the.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I know you go, Your Worship, and then we'll ask Mr. Smith to respond to the suggestion. Yep.
Thank you. And I think it's something that, as part of our recovery program, that we will have to definitely have a look at. I'm not sure about a policy per se, but working through this recovery period, I've had a letter from Andy Leslie, who is the chief executive of the Sports Association or sports organisations, and they are seeking rate or rent or lease relief for 12 months, for the next 12 months only. So I will forward that on to staff, but it's something we're going to have to consider to support our community. And this process is going to cost us, and we have to be aware of that. It's not only the sports organisations too, though. It's the likes of the senior citizens and some of those other organisations that have property on council land and they pay the rates. So we're going into LTP workshops. I think there's going to be some big discussions there on how we're going forward. But I support the general thrust of what you're saying, Councillor Glusina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Smith, do you have any comments about the need for a policy, or whether we handle these kind of requests on a one-off given the uniqueness of COVID, or what would be your thoughts?
There'll be some guidelines around that which we need to develop around, and it's about the impact on those people. So actually we need to see whether there has been identifying a need to actually have rent relief. In some situations, some of those organisations, and particularly not sports ones, because they've probably been extremely impacted, is that there may have been no impact at all. So it's about looking at those guidelines and how to make an objective decision in each case.
So that would be a report from staff, through you, Mr. Chair, a report from staff to elected members to make that decision.
Yeah.
What I don't want to, through the chair, we don't want to get to a situation where we're giving different relief to different organisations and they compare the relief and want to know why. Someone gets 10%, someone gets 50%, someone gets 100%. That sort of news travels very quickly, and the council needs to be 100% consistent in any relief that's given. That's my point.
The consistency needs to be around that we're identifying a specific need and addressing a specific need. I don't think that we have to offer 10% or 20% to everybody. It's just about that we actually look at the needs.
No. Yeah. No, it's not. It's not through the chair. It's not that we're going to offer different things to different people, but in the end, we will be probably treating organisations differently, and there has to be a good reason for that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's absolutely clear. Yep, thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, then there's a whole lot of these things that that have come up through my role and talking with other mayors and we've been pretty on the ball and doing what other councils have been doing with looking at our rates relief and looking at our rates waiver and fees and charges and all of and our recovery planning. But when is it that we will see a recovery plan per se with a beginning and an end as elected members and make the decisions like this one, whether we do or we don't do, that there is something that we can say, right, this is our recovery plan? Because as elected members and as leaders in the community and as council staff, it's not only about business continuity in the council organisation, but it goes back out to the age, what happens there with businesses, with how we work with iwi and Pacifica, about the youth and what sort of impacts we're going to have on them. So it's about us as leaders working with all of our community and about the input we have into, I guess, the schools going back. I don't really know. I'm just sort of, yes, we've got a recovery plan, but I haven't seen anything, and I want to know where elected members can have input into it. Thank you.
Yeah, so we gave the start of the recovery plan around the principles and the objectives last week.
Yes, you did. That's right.
Fleshing down into those various areas, specifically looking at what rent relief we might provide, and around, for example, sports funds, we're having a look at the community grants, the community contracts, and things, and making sure their KPIs are all right, and that work has started. So there's a large amount of work that needs to be done from now through, and that recovery planning will continue for, well, actually probably continue for 2 or 3 years, but the skeleton of it is there, and it's just a question of building those components on it. But the elected members will be made aware of all that all the way through and have input. So yeah, it's going to be, there's a lot of work, and that's part of the concern, is that when we get back to the office, we're moving from one phase to another and moving heavily into recovery. It's actually going to take a huge amount of work, as well as trying to reinstigate and start our business as usual and our projects again, because there's a lot of drive on actually making sure we get our projects up and running. So yeah, there's a lot of work ahead of us over the coming years, but certainly over the next couple of few months as we launch into structuring what will be quite a really different long-term plan this year, because it's going to be so focused around recovery rather than things that we may want to do. So it's going to have quite a big influence. I think we've started, and I think we've got it scheduled for tomorrow around some of our partnership agreements, partnership relationships we have with Rollcar and some of that, how we work together as a partnership within the community. So lots of things going on at the moment, and elected members will be kept in that loop.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Just listening to those comments back to finance and accounting, and Mrs. Farrar, if you're still there, how might we account for some of these things? So Her Worship has said, for example, people are looking for relief from rates and things, so that's a loss in revenue. No doubt a recovery plan will include potentially extra costs that council might be asked to meet. In terms of reporting and keeping financial information to the fore, would we integrate this with the whole LTP and have it as one entire thing to measure against, or would the recovery plan sit slightly separate somewhere in the financial, so we can have visibility of what is recovery and what is BAU? How might you plan to actually have the financial reporting aspects of this covered off?
I'll jump in first. I think the recovery plan will roll into, so the changes for our annual plan for the coming year, and as we go through, we need to look at what changes we need to do to make the annual plan sensible. And because we actually don't really know what's going to come up, and that's what everybody says, it's going to be a really, really unknown feast over the next period of time. And the long-term plan is going to be heavily focused on recovery. Well, so a lot of the actions we take will be bent towards or influenced by recovery. Reporting separately, we'll try and do as much as we can, but I think it's going to be such an integration between recovery planning and our long-term plan that I think that actually become very, very difficult over time.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Smith. That is logical. You can't have 3 or 4 lines of reporting, but on the other hand, as a one-off event, it's always helpful to know what is not likely to be ongoing. It is a one-off, and others are likely to be longer-term BAU things. Did you have any comments for the finance team, Mrs. Farrar? Yep. perhaps not with us anymore. No worries. Anyway, that'll be an issue that we'll want to think about from an FAR committee point of view as well, how we're going to keep visibility of the different aspects of that recovery versus all the other things we've got going on. So, so thank you for those comments. Are there any other questions from committee members or comments from staff or anyone else on the performance report? Financial information anyone wants to ask about or comment on?
I think, Mr. Chair, and I did comment on that when it was in the Corporate and Regulatory Committee about the savings that I do see on the performance report in the notes. There are some substantial cost lines that have been underspent, and rather than follow due process that we normally do, for this 1 year, I did make the suggestion that we look at rolling that over for savings for next year, because if we've got an excess this year, we could, rather than starting again each year as we do, we could roll it forward. I got an answer from Mrs. Farrar, from Ms. Farrar at the time, and I accept that, but I think it's something perhaps we need to keep in mind as part of our recovery planning when we get to the end of the year and see what the figures are really like.
Excellent. Thank you, Your Worship. Any final comments?
There certainly will be projects that we will and collectively work through that we will want to roll forward into the new year. But yeah, certainly if there's opportunities to have a net unspent rates for this year, that would be great, because we will want that very much in future years.
And through you, Mr. Chair, it's not only on capital items and projects, it's also, there's quite a lot on OPEX as well. That there looked to be some savings that are happening, but we need to find out that at the wash up at the end of the year.
Indeed, which is not very far away now, is it?
No.
A few more weeks to go. So thank you, Your Worship. Yes.
My apologies, but my Zoom has been cutting in and out over that discussion, so I've only heard a little bit of it. But my intention is, yes, it is close to the end of the year, and now we've got more certainty of where we're going in the future. At the next meeting, we will try and bring a better forecast as to what our year-end position might look like, and therefore we could make some possible advanced decisions about what we could be doing at the end of the year based on that forecast.
Excellent. That I'm sure would be appreciated and give some guidance to decisions. So is that pre 30 June end of year, Ms. Farrar, you're talking about, or just after that?
No, that's my intention.
Okay, excellent.
Pre-June.
Pre-June, yep. All right.
Pre-end of June, sorry.
Pre-end of June, yep. Balance date, yep. If there's no further comments or questions, there's a recommendation that the performance report be received. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder, please.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace, thank you. All those in favour of the report be received will say aye.
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 Those against no, that's carried. So I think that brings us to the end of the reports. We now have an item for members' information requests. Do I have any of those from committee members, please? Appears to be none. So that brings us to the conclusion of the meeting. I think that's every time we have one of these Zoom meetings, we get a little bit better at the flow of it and the chairing of it. We've had one or two technology glitches, but I've been grateful to be in the Office of Council and having 2 or 3 screens I can work with. So thank you, Mr. Lewis and your team, Ashes, who's still somewhere here in the building, offering to help me if anything cuts out again. So but it hasn't. So thank you. Any final items or comments or general business or anything wants to say before we close off?
I just want to thank you for chairing a good meeting. I think there's been some good outcomes and some good information sharing. So thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you, Worship. It's
yeah, and I endorse that as well, Chairman. It's run as a smooth meeting, and from my point of view, I didn't have any hitches at my end. Luckily, Tokoroa has got a lot of fast broadband.
Yes, we've got a big fibre cable right through the middle of town, I believe. I think Putaruru has it as well, the same cable, I think. But
it's getting there in Putaruru.
Yes.
Yep. Great. All right. Well, on that, those kind and positive notes, I'll call the meeting to a close, and we'll obviously be in further discussion around the audit, which was a significant item of discussion today, and the timing and things. So we'll deal with that in due course. But thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day. We'll conclude the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.